Well, good morning. This is a called meeting of the Forsyth County Finance Committee. The members are Commissioners Mills, Cooper, CFO Dave Gruen, and I'm Eric Johnson, County Manager. Oh, and Dennis Brown. Sorry, Dennis. I can't count to 5. The first item would be the adoption of the agenda, which is showing on the screen. If you can scroll down a little bit, please. So we're going to deal with the other funding sources. We've already dealt with the general fund and the fire fund. So we're going to be dealing with several other funds today. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a second? I think we had 2 firsts.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Next item on the agenda, if you can scroll back up, is to approve an awful lot of minutes. These are the minutes from May 14th, May 18th, May 20th, May 26th, and May 28th. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at those?
I move we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Let me ask you something on this, if I may, okay? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Do you have 3 commissioners on? Is that correct?
Do we have Dennis?
I'm here.
Yes.
There we go.
Okay.
There's 3.
Okay, and that's okay on the finance committee? That's not a problem with that being a quorum?
Yeah, it's an advertised meeting.
Okay, just checking, wanted to make sure that we are all in order here.
Well, I don't know how else we'd operate if we couldn't meet with after having advertised.
You still have Eric? Eric, are you out there? Are you unmuted? I think we need to call for the vote on the minutes.
He's not on my screen anymore.
Uh-oh.
He's not fine either. I think he must have gotten kicked off.
Okay, I guess we can, if you're ready, we can, again, a quorum. The committee is 5 people and a quorum is 3 of any of those
I've got
5.
one question, Dave, and
Sure.
maybe I got this and I forgot about it, but I noticed in the minutes that I had asked for attrition rate by department. Did we get that?
I don't recall seeing it. We will follow up on that. Staff is on if they'll make a note to go ahead and, I think we had requested that from Personnel Services. I'm not sure we'd gotten it back, at least not to distribute to you all. So we'll follow up on that. That would be the turnover rate. You wanted it by department, I think?
Yeah, I had just
Okay.
asked for what is our attrition rate by department?
I'm pretty sure we'd forwarded the request, but we'll follow up because I know it takes them some time to assemble that by department. So, okay. No, we'll be glad to follow up on that. All right, Eric's back, I think.
Yeah,
We
my computer decided to punish me anyway.
We answered a few questions, Eric. I think we're ready to call the vote on the adoption of the minutes.
Okay. Is there, Dennis, you had a motion to adopt. Were you adopting A through E?
Yeah, all of them. That was
Okay.
my motion.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, so I think that as for those that are watching, I know that we've got, we have 34 participants, so we've got a large group that are watching. And what we've talked about in prior meetings is simply that our best suggestion for the board is that the board delay adoption of the 21 budget beyond what was originally anticipated, which had been September, and maybe push it as far as November, simply because we'll be getting more information on revenues. We'll have a better understanding of the impact of the recession and the pandemic. And so,
Eric,
those
can you
that-
ask everybody to mute their phones?
yes, if everyone could mute their phone. We've got, yeah, whoever was 2022 at the end of their phone number, we were getting a message from them. So we're going to continue to go through other funds, but they have some of the same challenges in terms of seeing what impacts there may be. And so the Finance Committee will continue to go through all of this, but with the expectation that the decisions about what to recommend in the budget will come later in the year. And there's even the potential that the board could amend the budget during the year. And that kind of came up as one of the discussions when we talked about compensation increases, that the board could do something in January, but consider doing a supplement later, just based on economic conditions. Dave, you want to talk about what information we have since the last time?
Sure. We have one additional piece of data that has come in, and that is the Taft collections based on auto sales for the month of June. Continues to improve from 2 months prior to that when it bottomed out for our county. Compared to an adjusted amount from June of 2019, our Taft was down 19.46%. That compares to a statewide number of Taft collections still for June were down 31.2%. So we continue to perform better than the state as a whole based on the actual auto sales in our county. And one little qualification for that for everyone listening is it is not just where the cars are sold. So I mean, while it helps in other areas of service and parts stuff, whenever you buy a car, if you go out of county and buy the car, but you live here in Forsyth, it's wherever the car is tagged, that's where the Taft dollars go back to. So this represents auto purchases by our residents for the month of June. And
Okay.
that's it.
Dave, I'll share with them, with our board, what I shared with you and Eric yesterday.
Sure.
I talked to the guys that own Andine Chevrolet over the weekend. We were at a ball tournament together, and I did not realize that part of this car, the problem with the car dealerships is not that they can't sell the cars here in Forsyth. It's they can't get the cars in from the manufacturers. They've got, I'll just use Corvette as the example. They've come out with a new line of Corvettes. Well, they were promised 12 Corvettes. They've got 30 Corvettes sold, but so far they haven't gotten in but 2. So it's every time on the manufacturing line, they get a case of COVID, they have to shut down the whole line. So they've had a problem with the manufacturer being able to get any cars to them. So that's the problem. It's not that they can't sell the cars, they just can't get the cars promised to them in. So I didn't know that. I was surprised by that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. They told me I have to wait for my vet to come in later in the year. So I guess I'll just have to wait.
Well, you can get one of them, but you can't get the other one, right, Dave?
Yeah. Or not the color you want, because, my wife wants a certain color. So.
Sure. Well, Commissioner, I thought about that yesterday when I drove by that dealership at the end of the day. Okay, anything else, Dave, you want to share? I know that we get another month's worth of unemployment information that's supposed to come out, I think, next Wednesday, which will give us a sense of, there's national data out, but to get a sense of what's happening within our community. But I'm hoping
Right.
that we come down. It was 7.9% last month.
Yep,
Okay.
and then the end of next week, we'll get our next sales tax numbers for June.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on and go to E911? Okay,
All right.
hearing none.
If we're ready, I'll go ahead and introduce that. I know Chris should be on the line to talk about it. First, a brief summary and then the new items. That fund, which completely comes from fees assessed on various types of telephone and iPhone bills and so on, wireless services, continues to be very strong in the collections exceeding the operating expenses, and we've been able to fund some capital improvements there as well for whatever those fees are qualified for, which is most of the 911 expenses. And as such, the fund continues to maintain a strong balance of over $3 million compared to an operating expense of about $5.25 million. Overall, the operating expenses even then are down in the proposed budget of just under 10%. And so overall, that makes an increase of the operating of 2.47% over the prior year. Now, of course, without the capital, they spent $400,000 last year or the current year. The total budget's really down 5%. With all of that, so that one is well funded, and I'm not seeing those fees necessarily dropping during a recession unless people don't pay for as many lines on their wireless and so on. With that, Chris may want to comment on up in the top half of the summary. There's 3 new item requests. One is for a position. I'm sorry, 2 are for position. I'm trying to say, I think maybe there's 2 communications officers, 1 operations manager. That's 3, and then some reclassifications from different communications officer levels from 4 to 5.
I have a question before you go to the new stuff.
Yep. Well, those are new items. Go ahead.
I'm assuming that the costs here reflect the pay increase that we were contemplating when we started this whole process. Is that correct?
The 2%.
Oh, so this has been revised to 2% or not?
Yeah, all the funding and all of our operating budgets, we went back, and unless for some
Okay.
reason they didn't do this one, but I think staff will confirm that we reduced the funding available for raises next year from 4% to 2%.
Okay. So that's different from what we had when we were going through the general fund departments.
Well, in the beginning, yes, we had to update that, and we gave the total
Okay.
impact for the general fund.
All
I
right,
do have
thank
a
you.
question, okay? I have a question here for me, all right?
Sure.
Because the page you're saying is page 3. And what I'm going from is the agenda, that original agenda in section 7. And of course, there is no page 3 that has this on there. So what page is this on of the original budget agenda for 2021 continuation track 1? Is that not in this one? Am I missing something?
Hold on.
I don't know. We'll let staff look at that. I don't have that one in front of me.
It was a new little book.
Okay.
This was not in the original track 1 book.
Okay, then
Oh, okay, right. The track 1 book, these funds were not in there.
Okay, when was this book sent out?
Initially 2 weeks ago, and then when we moved the meeting to this week, we sent it out again about a little over a week ago.
Yeah, the copy I have is dated July 15th.
Okay, here's my question. Did you only send it via online with an email?
We usually send them by email, right?
No, I got it in my mailbox.
And a hard
Yeah,
copy
I
too.
got
I'm
it.
sorry. That's true. These things are also hard copy.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a hard copy.
Well, you guys continue. I'm gonna have to go look for my hard copy because I'm not aware of having that. But go ahead with your meeting. I can hear you.
Right.
Okay. And it's on the screen too, but if you need to look at a particular account, we can put that on the screen as well. Okay, Eric, did you have something else there in the operating budget or go back up to the new items?
No, I think at this point, maybe start with the reclasses because those are existing positions and then kind of move up from there. Morning,
All
Chris.
right.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I do want to. I've been, as y'all know, I've been director over 911 for the last year, and during that time, I have really been watching and evaluating what we need for now, and continue to positioning us as we continue to grow. Our calls were up. 911 calls were up right at 10% from 2018 to 2019 last year, and so what this does is it allows these positions, the reclasses and the operations manager, it allows us to begin to set our shifts up so that when the primary supervisor is out, there is a clear designation of who is in charge on a shift, and that we can have a more or less a career ladder type where we can, have true structure and a little bit deeper than what we have now. So that would be the purpose of the reclasses. Those are the existing supervisors that would be reclassed up. A new assistant shift supervisor, which is not a new head count for us. It is just a new structure, would become in the existing CAT communication officer 4 positions. And then the operations manager would oversee all 4 shift supervisors. So it puts there a supervisor that can focus just on the shifts. And I feel like that's something we really need right now. The communications officer 3 position, those 2 positions, that is to get us to 11 communication officers on every shift. Right now we have 2 shifts. If we were fully staffed, we have 3 vacancies right now. But if we were fully staffed, we would have 11 on 2 shifts and 10 on 2 shifts. So this puts us at 11 communication officers on each shift. And that allows us to have the relief factor. So when individuals are taking off, we can spend a little less time on overtime. And also, as we grow and our call volume goes up, we're going to have to increase what we consider our minimum staffing on our shifts. So this kind of everything kind of gets us ready for that. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Chris, I know you're going through an accreditation update. Is there a recommended ratio based on call volume or anything else that helps kind of drive the size of a shift?
No, we've actually asked that through APCO and NINA, which are 2 of the 911 organizations, and they don't have at this point, they don't have that. But we've definitely been asking around. We are from 911 centers that take our size, we have a comparable shift sizes.
Okay.
Chris, is there any capital expenditure like in the infrastructure for 911 that's needed?
So we did a lot of projects this year, and there is going to be one thing next year that's not here that has just come up, that both the sheriff, fire department, and I are going to have a share of the expense on for new servers and some new infrastructure equipment. But we're looking at doing that. I think we've got to talk to the sheriff and the fire chief as well on what the final funding is going to look like. But it looks like those payments will be spread out over several years. So it's not going to be a huge hit. What we have done is gone in and looked at our big expenses and kind of planned that out over the next 10 years so that what we can do is not take 1 year. And this year, the end of 2019 and 2020, we've taken a pretty sizable, I don't say hit, that's not, but we've made quite a bit of purchases in capital, things that probably should have been done several years ago. For instance, if you've not visited us yet, you'll notice next time you're there that we have new furniture throughout the 911 center. That probably should have been done.
Right.
That project should have probably been done several years ago. But now what we've done is put all that on a plan, even new chairs, new computers, and looked at what our usage is and the recommendations. And this year, 2021 just happens to be a year that we don't have a lot of capital. And so that's why I also don't want to, take us all, leave some and to be able to put back into reserve. So when we have those big expenses, we've got the reserve to be able to get those.
Yeah, with the way your money comes into, it just needs to be planned out.
Absolutely, Commissioner. I couldn't agree with you more.
Chris, is the operations manager going to be someone that can fill in if you needed to have someone do, will they have the technical skills to do that or not?
Yes, they will. That will be a requirement of the job that they have been a communication officer for a certain amount of years. And I mean, we are still working on this with Pat and what this is going to look like exactly, but kind of in theory, a communications officer 4 would become a communications officer 5 one day. And the current supervisors, them and maybe a few others from the 911 center would be the ones eligible to be able to take the position of the operations manager. So they would not only have the technical, they would know our systems, everything for our 911 center.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we're realizing now the value of having administrative staff that can fill in based on the exposure that we have throughout our organization to COVID-19. So having another position that has that skill set seems important.
Absolutely. And not only that, just for an emergent, but even if if a supervisor maybe have an extended absence or something, they could be used for
Yeah.
those times as well.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, is everyone ready to move on to the next organization?
Should be engineering fund, insurance premium tax fund. Okay, it's up there in the screen. We'll move down to the summary portion first. This is one I'm going to talk about the revenues a little bit because this is another sole source fund, virtually sole source. They get a little bit from fees in, but the insurance premium tax comes from our share. It's collected statewide. Our share of a tax on insurance premiums of all sorts across the state. Because of that, and the pandemic and the recession, I think there's a high degree of uncertainty in this revenue source. And what makes this even more difficult to project is this is distributed in one lump sum by the state in early October. So we can't even tell yet the effect on this revenue source or insurance premiums due to the recession. And we most of us know we've seen some kind of discount or reduction in our auto insurance premiums. How long that will last or how temporary that is, we don't know yet. So we backed off when we first estimated this. We've been estimating this for growth in that revenue source by over 500,000 a year, maybe 700,000-800,000 per year, a good strong percent, up to the point where it was 11.75 million last year in 2019. So following that trend, when we first put this budget together early this year, the revenue we had projected was 13.2 million for 2021. You can see here we've backed off of that 500,000, at least almost back to the current year budget. And when we did that, what we had to do to balance this budget was the amount of equipment they had for capital replacements on their scheduled capital replacement program. We tried to fund, as you can see by the dollar amount for capital in the current and prior years, try to fund those out of this fund, this revenue source. But knowing it was at this level of revenue going to be insufficient next year, we have moved the capital replacement equipment out to our capital funded program in the capital outlay fund. So we took that out of here to balance that. With that, we still need just over 300,000 of beginning fund balance up there shown as other financing sources to balance this fund, and bringing the balance down to a projected about 3.4 million by the end of next year, which is a little bit under, right around our 25% reserve threshold we like to maintain. So this fund is under a lot of pressure just to maintain its operating expenses. And this is without adding any of the new items that are mentioned up above. So I just wanted the commission to be aware. And that's one reason why if we don't adopt the budget till November, we should see how much of this revenue comes in early October and have a better idea how to balance this budget by the time the board adopts it. Now, again, if the board is ready to adopt a budget before November and October or September, we can still go in and amend this budget when the revenues are a little more known. But that's the challenge of this fund. Other than that, it includes the roads and bridges, traffic engineering, and so on are part of this fund and funded from that source. because those services are in the unincorporated part of the county. The city would get their own insurance premium tax, and that's why this is segregated as a separate fund. With that, overall, you can see the budget is fairly flat. The total operating budget is up 0.73%. And that's pretty much true across the board. As you look each category up or down a little bit, 1% or barely anything at all. That's a quick overview of the budget itself. We can take any questions on that. If none, we'll go up to the top there and the new items requested.
Okay.
All right.
So Dave, if our projections are correct, I mean, our choices in how we spend this money, we use this typically to pave roads.
Not the paving so much. This is more maintenance. For example, well, even the repaving, we use part of the SPLOST for the repaving program each year along with LMIG. So it's not so much that here or even the building of roads, but there are crews here, and John can get into more details, that go out and do some of our spot patching or road repairs. We may see their trucks around the county. That funding is here. The personnel costs, the vehicles, the supplies, traffic controls, the lines, guardrails, things, all the maintenance of all those facilities are here.
Okay.
That's
And
why we look at
added
it
a
as.
crew last year, I recall, didn't we?
Pardon?
We added a crew last year for Rick to use based on the additional roadways that we have to maintain.
Yeah, it was requested. We added a crew, or I know at least we added a position to make a larger crew wherever we landed last year on that.
For our 4 lanes.
Yeah, for the maintenance of our parkways, I think as they call them.
Yep, I remember that.
So Dave, a question. So you talked about the fund balance and having the 25% is really part of keeping the AAAs. You're shifting some of the capital equipment over to the capital fund, which is funded with excess revenue from the general fund. But we have a request for additional items. Right now, you don't have the revenue to do it, do you?
Right. Now, well, what it would do is we'd have to increase that. You're correct. We'd have to increase that use of beginning balance to 300,000, which would lower the ending fund
Shouldn't be
balance.
going below the
That
25%.
amount. Right. We try not to. That's the guidance from the board's policy. So that would put pressure on it. That's why this is a very, very tight fund right now to try to balance at that level.
And I'm not saying that because I don't agree with the request, but I think, I've talked to each of the commissioners that are on the finance committee, and that Commissioner Cooper's suggestion sent out this morning, just some bullets on that. But one of the items I think that can be considered is to take those positions in engineering that are truly associated with the capital program and charge them to the capital program. We already do that for outside consultants, like Atlas, but we don't do that for our own staff. And at this point, we're running up against not having enough money to address some of the maintenance needs that we have.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting a decision today. I'm just saying that I think this is when we have to start to figure out how we can address the needs we have with revenues that are somewhat constrained.
I like this idea because I think it more accurately reflects the true cost of each project, because when you have a big project, especially, those costs of the whatever the experts, engineers, consultants, whatever we hire, are a true cost of that project. And if you allocate those costs like you're talking about, I think that's a better way to do it. My opinion.
But when do you take them out?
When it's over, I guess.
Only when you don't have a program. But I think at this point, it's a great question, Commissioner. I mean, at this point, we've got projects we're awarding that have a 3-year timeline if there's no weather delays. It doesn't seem like we have projects without some type of a weather delay. McGinnis Ferry is anticipated 2 years out, because that's when the state will have their construction money ready, and we have to acquire the right of way before. I don't know that we know yet exactly when Old Atlanta, but you've probably got 5 years of projects queued up. And coincidentally, 5 years from now, SPLOST 9 will kick in, assuming that you continue the path of having every SPLOST successfully passed by voters. So we're 1 year into a 6-year cycle, and 5 years from now would start the next cycle if it's approved. So potentially you'd never not have projects going. And as long as you have impact fees, whether you have SPLOST, you still have money coming in that has to be spent on projects that provide capacity for new people and businesses moving into the community. So it's a good question, but at this point, it would appear that you've got 5 years worth of some very heavy activity that is anticipated.
E- Eric, could I say something?
Sure.
So I have seen what you're proposing. I have seen that done at Gainesville in past years. Also, I'm aware that Hall County at one point, and I assume they're still doing it. I don't know that for a fact, but at one point they were doing the same thing, paying for inspectors and even administration, finance, things like that. In this particular case, it was using SPLOST funding to pay for project cost, pay for the inspectors, pay for administration, things like that. So I guess my point is I've seen this done before.
Yeah. It's fairly routine. It's part of tracking what it really costs to construct assets. And we already do that with the outside resources. We just haven't done it internally, but we're running up against having available money to do things that I think that you'd want to be able to do. Thanks, Tim. Do you want to talk about the new positions and the equipment? Who's going to, John, you on?
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yes.
Denise is gonna speak to the new position. Denise is on. Go ahead, Denise.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It took me a little while to get unmuted.
Good morning.
We presently have, good morning. We presently have 3 sidewalk projects that are under construction. We have 3 widening projects, Pilgrim Mill Road, Ronald Reagan, soon to be SR 369. With Old Atlanta, we're hoping to begin all of this year, and McGinnis Ferry, January or February of next year, the phase 1 widening. And we also have 3 small intersection jobs that will be 2 of them campground at Dickerson and Crossroads at Bennett that will be beginning in September. And then the Coal Mountain Connector possibly spring of next year. So we are requesting that an assistant be provided for capital improvements, the projects. He or she will be primarily assisting as an on-site construction personnel. There'll be more of a proactive role that will be continually assessing the operations of the project. They'll also serve as a communication link between the on-site personnel and issues and management. And fourthly, if needed, we'll utilize this person in right-of-way negotiations when we have owners requesting or having engineering questions. So this is a supportive role for myself, and I think with all the projects that we have coming up, and certainly in some of the more visual and outspoken areas, we're going to need a little bit closer handle on what's going on site. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I think that's a great idea.
I do too, Cindy. I think we've had issues before with us not having enough staff and staffing up to help John and them get all of the things they have to balance done. So I think that's a great idea.
So Denise, before you leave that, I guess the question I have is, the next step down is construction inspectors. And I know that when we awarded Ronald Reagan, we backed off of the CE&I that we would outsource to Atlas on that, which to me meant that we were accepting more responsibility for what may be a challenging project, since we bought a whole bunch of wetland credits for a reason. And of course, we had to buy wetland credits on 369. So my concern is you have one senior construction inspector that, as far as I know, is dedicated to projects, the other being more dedicated to developments. And so my concern is that you don't have enough staff, even with this additional engineering technician position, to be able to deal with the volume of projects that you just went through.
We probably not. I know that Ronald Reagan, we're co-inspecting with Atlas, and our senior inspector will be on that job. We have I think 3 other inspectors that are used when needed on capital projects. They also work in the private sector. They're not as seasoned as this individual that would be on Ronald Reagan. I think we may need 2 more seasoned personnel if we decide that Forsyth County is going to be responsible in any way on the Old Atlanta or McGinnis Ferry project. We may need 2.
Yeah.
I just don't know how we're.
Well,
sorry?
the alternative is to spend money on Atlas, but the last numbers I saw from them suggest that a position from Atlas costs us between $140,000 to $160,000 a year, and you're asking for this engineering tech with the total cost of $79,000. So, not to suggest that we don't need Atlas as backing us up, but it just seems like we need additional resources, and that's part of my concern about looking at the opportunity to charge some positions that are dedicated to road projects to those capital sources.
Yes, I think that might be a necessity, especially with Old Atlanta. I don't know if we're going to use Atlas. If not, then we are going to need a senior inspector on that job, and probably more of a medium level inspector as well. It's a large project, and there's a lot of eyes going to be on that project. McGinnis Ferry will be working with Johns Creek and Alpharetta. So we are also going to need a seasoned person. We have a bridge on the Alpharetta side. We have several walls on both Old Atlanta and McGinnis Ferry. We have some transmission relocations on Old Atlanta. So there's going to be a need for the folks out there on site to have an overall experience on projects, just not someone that's adept at paving or storm or something. It's going to have to be individuals that have seasoned experience relating to the entire project.
Yeah. Well, you brought up Old Atlanta 4 and 5, and the challenge there is that's the project where the engineer of record abandoned us, and so that's one where we're probably challenged to have is Atlas now taking over that responsibility as the engineer of record for that project?
Well, they are providing updated plans, but I don't know if they would be considered an engineer of record. John, what are your thoughts on that?
The original designer is still the engineer of record, but the Atlas has provided updates to the current design, and they have sealed and certified all of the updates that they've made to the plans.
Okay.
And we are looking toward utilizing Atlas on the Old Atlanta Road project to assist with CEI, as they typically assist the water department in the water and sewer inspections, and I assume that they'll do that on that project as well. So it makes sense to utilize them to assist us on that also. As far as McGinnis Ferry Road, since it's a joint project with 2 other cities, we'll definitely want to utilize Atlas for the entire management of the CEI on that project, so that we're, splitting the cost basically.
But if you were charging your cost to the project, you could do the same with that.
Yeah, I'm just, I'll have to defer to, Ken and Dave to see if we could defer that cost and also charge the other two cities for it. I was under the impression that we would have to contract it out in order to split it up that way.
Well, I mean, to Tim's point, most jurisdictions have been doing the chargebacks of staff to projects for decades.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we considered doing that back during the downturn.
Sure.
And we're keeping up with our staff's time in case finance needed to charge it back to those projects. So yeah, we're well aware that can be done, and if that's a need, then we'll do what finance needs us to do to make sure that they can charge back to those projects.
Okay. Well, I'm pressing the issue because, we've had challenges with our favorite vendors. I won't name them, but with two different firms that have been building our roads. And at some point, it comes down to our responsibility to oversee our projects, even when we're hiring other firms like Atlas for their expertise to assist us in that.
Certainly.
John, just a question. If we go out and hire, more employees to do this work, we won't be double dipping in hiring these employees and using Atlas both, will we?
Well, we'll still have to utilize Atlas as an extension of our staff, as we always have. Depending on the number of projects and the demand we have. But when we have few projects, if we don't utilize Atlas, but we don't have to get rid of our staff. But if we do have a downturn, our projects typically continue to some degree because we have splash and impact fees. But when development slows down, then we have more time for our development inspectors to spend more time on our county projects, and then we're able to utilize Atlas even less.
I think you made a good point, John. You can flex Atlas based on the priority of hanging on to county staff. But since these are multi-year projects, the projects tend to go on even if there is, we didn't halt Ronald Reagan because of a recession. We're not halting 369 because of a recession. We borrowed $100 million a year ago from SPLOST. So we have the money to go forward with projects regardless of what's happening on operating revenues.
John, where are you going to put them?
It's a good question, but I'm sure we could find somewhere to put them.
Yeah, we're Commissioner Mills. We're working on the former DFAX building out on State Route 20, and that should be ready later this summer. And there's additional space there available.
So going back to Old Atlanta, did that contractor of record bail on us? Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. He did.
Yeah.
Who is that?
That was Gresham Smith. The county had to enter into a settlement agreement with them on two projects they were designing for the county: Old Atlanta Road, Phase 4 and 5, and also the Shiloh Road sidewalk.
Well, I would like to bring to the full board, Cindy and Molly, that we have a list, and when people don't live up to their expectations with the county, that they not get future business. So I would like to get y'all support in doing that so that we can we're not awarding any contracts to people that leave us holding the bag on this stuff.
Is there not something that procurement has a rule about that or something already?
I don't think so.
Well, you can debar them. My understanding is they chose not to do business with us again. So, you may have the basis to debar them, and we can certainly pursue that.
Well, what happens though is commissioners change, people change out, and the next thing you know, there's a big project and they're like, okay, they change their mind and there they are to get the business again when it's fair weather. But then when it's something that's for whatever reason, then they bail out. And I just think that we need to we need to reward good behavior and not punish, but I mean, just not do business with people that don't treat the county right.
Okay. All right, so that'll be an action item. Look at the potential for debarring Gresham Smith.
Yeah, can you
You know,
check?
that brings up a good question though, and maybe this is something that should be on a agenda at a later time, but it is an engineering question. John, do y'all go and look at a project? And I know like Castleberry Road is one that, God forbid, I mean, those of us on the board have taken a beating over. But do you ever look at engineering plans, like if we have multiple lawsuits over engineering, you know, that we have issues over stormwater or drainage or whatever, that we really realize sometime later that there were real problems with the engineering, you know, that maybe those plans should have been updated, or that you have questions over, that maybe something wasn't engineered right. Do you ever go back and look at those or question those?
Well, I guess when and if that occurs, it's more of a legal issue, and that would be something for Ken to look into, evaluate, and determine if he needs to take any action regarding possibly error and omissions in the plans.
Well, right now, that's what Cindy is saying. Right now, John, there is one going on as far as stormwater damage from the widening of Castleberry, and that one has gone all the way to Charity and to the insurance company, but it's still, negotiation is still going on as far as what the insurance company is willing to pay and what we are liable for. That, as well as another one in the past, which I think y'all remember, the wiped out bridge. So that's two that I have specifically that is costing us money from Castleberry. So.
All right. What about LMIG? Are we concerned about LMIG and what we're going to do on it? Are we going to reprioritize roads, or do we know yet? Has the state told us on LMIG what it's going to do?
I don't know that we've heard anything regarding LMIG for 2021. We've already got our LMIG check for 2020 in the bank, but we should be hearing soon what our formula amount is for 2021. They've got our mileage information, and I assume that they'll be putting that information out soon.
That's something we're going to have to probably talk about later, because everybody says that fuel tax was down and it's going to be less. And I guess we'll have to make a determination. Are we going to put more money into it? Or are we going to pave less roads, or how we're going to handle that?
Well, we've always used Splosh to supplement our resurfacing, and used LMIG for that as well. So whatever the LMIG amount is, Splosh would make up the difference for what we typically do annually.
So that would cut into the Splosh we were going to use to supplement some of the roads?
Well,
That's right.
Yeah, you're going to get to the point where we're 1 year into a 6-year SPLOST, and we're getting close to having allocated all the transportation dollars. Assuming, as John said, that you're using SPLOST to supplement LMIG for the next 5 years.
Maybe things have picked up quicker though than the governor thought it would. So maybe it won't be as bad as what they first thought. When will we have to determine that? Are we a month?
We'll know when GDOT sends us and tells us what our formula amount is going to be. I believe they typically do that around this time of the year, so I would think we should hear within the next month, I would think.
Okay. I thought they were close to it, like real close.
They should be. I'm pretty sure we usually hear in July, about July of every year. But
Yeah.
they might be running late this year.
Okay. What else?
Denise, you want to talk about the super shot diesel melter?
Rick, go ahead and speak.
Hey, Rick.
Morning. What would y'all like to know?
Well, is this a replacement? Is this new? Give us a sense of what we accomplished.
We're gonna call it both, Eric. I did not do it under replacements because the one that it will be replacing was only, I don't know, $989 or something. So it was not part of the capital asset program. That machine holds 10 gallons of tar or material to patch, takes about an hour to melt that block to do the job. Depending on the cracks, would go as a rough estimate about 100, 150 feet. Then you'd be waiting another hour before you could continue crack sealing. The machine that I'm asking for is a 100-gallon machine. It will melt that whole 100 gallons in very short order, but you don't have to wait for it all to be completely melted to start. And, you know, in that same respect, what you might do in, you know, 3 or 5 days time, you would probably do in a half a day with the new machine.
So we tend to think of technology as computers, but this is a way to increase the productivity of your existing staff.
It is. It'd be the same guys using the machine. It's just they'd be way more efficient, and we'd be getting a lot more roads covered and
Sure.
get those cracks sealed to get those roads to last a little bit longer.
Good.
Well, it sounds good to me. I just looked at one online. Any questions with that? And that would then go into, I assume, Dave, our replacement program?
Right, after this point, right?
Okay, any other questions for engineering?
I just have one quick one, John. Have they started Ronald Reagan yet?
Denise, you still on? Can you speak to them?
Yes, I'm here. We had an on-site meeting last week, and they had already started to put up the orange barrier fencing, and they're going to start on the Shiloh Road side. So I don't believe they've started the clearing yet. I think that will wait until the 1st of August, but they've started putting up their erosion control methods. So we should start seeing some grading or clearing by the 1st of August.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for engineer? We'll move on to water and sewer.
Thank
All right.
y'all.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Eric, did we add any employees today?
Well, we're not making decisions.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if we're ready to move on to the summary page for our water and sewer utility, which is arguably the largest business the county has now approaching. I think we've exceeded over 60,000 water customers. So what you see here in the operating budget, I'll focus on the expenditure side there, is to run a system that large is basically, if you take out debt service, just under about $50 million to operate this large of a water and sewer system. That being said, there is some changes in the operating expense budgets. They have increased by just over 12%. Helping to cover this is the fact that we have finally, after many years of not having any, we've had rate increases, and those are indexed or set each year going forward now from what the board approved. I'll let staff comment before we get to new items at the top of the page on changes in operating expenses. What I recall seeing as I looked through this was it's across the various contracts to run the sewer plants, supplies, cost of water, those kinds of things. These expenses all go toward running a system that is this large, which is basically over a $500 million system now as far as infrastructure is concerned. With that, I'll let water and sewer staff, go ahead, Eric, comment on the operating budget.
And I know we have our new finance guy there at Water and Sewer. You talked about the index cost, but when I look at the revenues, the charges for services, they're actually down a fraction of a percent from 20 to 21. So are we doing a true up, or what's the basis for revenue actually declining in the area that looks like could be driven by the indexed fees?
Yeah.
I would say, Dave, if
Go
I
ahead.
can comment on that, I would say last year's budget request, we had just come off the rate study, and we chose on some of the projections to use the projections that came out of the rate study instead of our normal way. So I would probably say truing up, mainly on the sewer revenue side. You see we're basically flat. But in this year, we went back to our normal method of projecting the growth, looking at what our growth in both water customers, sewer customers, and then applying rates and all. So I think that's, I would say like you did, is truing up.
Okay, but your budget used to the dollar what was assumed in revenue for this current year. So is there an area on the expenditure side of 2020 where you're going to be spending less based on taking in less revenue?
I have to look at that.
I mean, that's a follow. I mean, I don't want to slow today, but you may follow up to tell us if the revenue is overestimated for 2020, where do you think the impact is on the expenditure side?
Okay, yeah, I'll have to follow back up on that. And see if I can.
Eric, you probably would see some decreased cost with cost of energy, cost of chemicals. Some of those kind of costs probably would go down slightly.
Okay. You're thinking the expenses were also pulled out of the rate study as well?
A lot of them were, yes.
Well, that was a balanced budget, so there's a $2.5 million contingency in there, and there's probably some flexibility in the transfer to the capital fund.
Yeah.
Some of our expenses we had better information on, and we used ours, so it's probably a mixed bag.
Okay.
So some of the expenses last year and this year, just based on just actuals. I will say that there's nothing big changing in this budget or our costs. We're not expecting anything unusual, like Dave said, like increases in flow, increases in chemical costs, contract operations, increase in that, not adding any additional people there. So it's a pretty mild budget for us as far as we're not asking for any additional people.
Okay.
And it's a little bit down on equipment requests. We do have some capital vehicle requests under our policy to be replaced, but
Okay.
just a few new items.
All right. Thank you. So if you want to talk about, unless there are other questions, talk about the requests at the top of the page.
Is that to me or to Dave?
That's to you.
Okay. At top of the page are a list of things that we are requesting, and actually, I think in our meeting with the finance staff we talked about removing some of these small dollar items that are like, you know, fixing the door and remodeling training areas, countertops. So I think we were given direction to try to go ahead and do some of this year. So whether or not you leave those in or take them out, but the things we're requesting there, and Johnny Millwood, I think you're on the phone, if on the line, if you want to chime in. We want to add a 40-foot roll-off container out back to store some of our equipment. And I know the cost of the container is like $7,500. Johnny, can you expand on what the 40,000 is for the equipment?
It is the for the pump techs. It's to the equipment to allow them the ability to rebuild the pumps and to service pumps here at our shop instead of having to outsource those.
Okay, so it's equipment for the pump techs that you're going to move in there. Other items there, small dollar item for a landscape rake. We've started doing more of our own landscapes instead of hiring it out, and something to help get up rocks and sticks. A lot of our sewer work is in swampy areas. If it's not swampy when we go in, the beavers come along. The next thing we know, we're working in a swamp. And so these swamp pads are these mats that you can lay down when you've got to put equipment in the area to not sink and bury them up. The biggest dollar item there, the $42,500, is for a track vehicle that can get in those swampy areas. It can carry our cameras to do our sewer inspections. We've got areas down along Big Creek that we just simply can't always get in there that are very swampy and wet. And then there is a new piece of equipment that's been successful, is SL Rat. This is a device that you put on take the sewer manhole lid off, you put this device in, and it can shoot a sound wave down the sewer line to the next one and send a signal back. And it tells you if there's a blockage in the line or if there's something impeding that signal to bounce back. So where we pop the lids now and put a sewer camera down the line, and it's very a slow process, these things can just be moved around and you can cover a lot more footage each day. So we consider this one of those cost savings and improvement in our functionality that the county manager had asked us to look at. We think we're going to cover a lot more feet of the sewer line inspection each year by using this device. This is the equipment I believe Gwinnett County has transitioned to and had very good success. And then we've got these building and repair items in there. Some of that we're going to try to take care of this year. And another storage shed. So very small, minimal amount of new equipment being requested this year. Probably the lowest one in many years for our department.
Any questions? Again, good suggestions about using technology to improve service.
Eric, just a comment. We more and more our staff takes payments over the phone using credit cards, but we do have a pretty substantial cost that we wind up paying for that. If you look on the middle of page 21, you'll see that that annual cost for using credit cards. It's a pretty, to me, it's always been a surprising figure.
Well, we pass that on to the customer, don't we?
No, we don't charge a surcharge for doing that.
But the cost is included in the rates. When we did the
The
rate
rate
study.
study reflected that. So if you
Right.
changed and charge only those that use it, then the you'd revisit the rates to tweak them.
That's correct. And I think our credit card rates may be, it may affect the type of accounts we have too. But we still feel the electronic, the online method saves a lot of bodies and speeds things up. So we encourage people for paying bills to use credit cards, and maybe not on large expensive items, but like tap fees. But
And Tim, are y'all going to be located down there with a new building with the tax collector?
we looked at that, and almost all of our people are online, and we kept track of just like walk-in customers, and we really didn't feel that we had a need to have a person in there. It may increase if we had a presence there, but a large percentage of our people now do their business online, and we with this COVID issue, we've started selling meters online and setting up accounts. So we've really minimized the traffic that we have in here, and the customers seem to like it, and so do we. So really didn't see a need. And it would be complicated, but it could be done, or they could handle some things for us. So that's something we can look at. Maybe a way for them to do some minor transactions for us.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've introduced, I know the county manager and all, and some of the commissioners, but over my shoulder is Brad Wright. And if I could take just an opportunity to introduce him to you. I know we sent out a little press release, but he's our new Deputy Director of Business Services, and he'll be taking over the budgeting roles and financial roles, customer service. Brad's got a degree in business and management and a master's degree in accounting, and he's also a CPA. So he's had an extensive career with Verizon over 25 years and held national level positions in budgeting and finance. And so we're real excited to have him on board and help teach us some tricks and move us up a notch or two down in water and sewer.
Good. Welcome aboard. Good to have you.
He had a lot more zeros on his budgets than we do even.
Well, any other questions on this? I think you got very modest requests, and as you mentioned, to the extent that some of the stuff that can be done now, you knock it out and get some of those maintenance issues addressed rather than wait. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
What's next, Dave?
I believe it's solid waste fund. And
This is where we talk trash.
we're going to talk trash, or at least Tammy will. Looking at the summary of the solid waste fund, of course, our concern here has been, again, it's one primary income stream other than some income from the recycling centers, but is the decreased volumes we experienced at the landfill with the problems that the primary user out there has. And so you'll see from the 2020 budget to the proposed budget for next year, we've decreased that by more than $1 million. At that level, it looks like we need to still use some of the balance of the fund, which has been running over almost $6 million, to help balance all the operations that are coming out of that, although it's close. But a number of different programs are funded here in the solid waste fund. And let's see, no real change. Well, operating expenses are budgeted to be down 21%. And that's, I think, due to some of the backing off of some of the funding for those programs. Like we had a large contract amount last year for the litter pickup and so on. Other than that, all those functions there, other than the 750,000, are all related to solid waste qualifying type expenditures. The 750,000 are the transfers. There's two. 250,000 is a transfer out for the commission district beautification program, which I just sent a little summary of that funding last last evening to the commissioners. And the 500,000 is a transfer over to the general fund for general operating purposes, which you can do out of utility related revenues. And that hasn't changed. We've been transferring that 500,000 to the general fund probably for 8 or 9 years. That has assisted with that. But other than that 750,000, the other, about 2.4, 2.5 million is for the operations, and that is covered by the revenues at the reduced level.
So Dave, the board adopted a resolution last week, and in essence, it said that despite the change in the state law, that we would continue with our commitment that 50% of the revenue would meet certain eligible requirements. And it looks like next year, basically 75% of what we're going to spend out of.
Right. Yeah,
we're more used to calling this host fees, but 75% what we're spending meets that board resolution. So
right. At this
you're doing a
reduced
good
level,
job of what the board's intent is.
right. This reduced level of fees, this budget is usually used up more than 50%. If those fees go back up to the higher level, then that's something we'll have to track a little bit more exactly. But for example, at the bottom of this page, we have some more work to do with the position there. I don't know that we'll really have a restricted dollar amount at the end of the year. We'll track that with our estimates of this year's collections and operations. But that's the basic operating budget there for the handful of different programs included here. No new items at the top. And I mentioned Tammy's here, ready to answer any questions about those programs. And if you want to open up.
Are they still operating about half capacity like they've been?
Yeah, Sam might be
That
on
is
as well.
correct.
There you go, Sam.
Yes. Eagle Point landfill's running at around 3,000 tons or so a day, which is about half of what they were doing prior to the slope stability problem in 2018.
That's what I thought.
Yes, ma'am. And from what they've told me, they do not anticipate that changing over the next couple of years because EPD, from what I understand, they have not fully signed off yet on the consent order. So until that happens, they're not going to be able to increase the rate back to where they were.
So we can, when you look at this fund, you can pretty much see it'll probably remain about the same because they're not going to be increasing what they're taking in. That was my point. They bought a plant. They bought another landfill in Alabama, and that's where they're diverting it to.
Correct. Yes.
They also, Charlie Gray told me that they any day now probably we're going to be hearing who's going to be taking over advanced disposal.
That's my understanding.
The next couple of months, that it's likely not going to be waste management. And it would probably be in our best interest if it would be a smaller company.
That's what I've heard as well.
So Commissioner, you're saying Waste Management is going to divest this asset? They're selling it off?
That's what I've heard.
That's my understanding as well.
I don't think the deal with Waste Management.
Yeah, it would be in our best interest, I think, with our MOU being what it is, dealing with a smaller company, I think would be in our best interest. But we'll get whatever we get.
Okay, anything else here? There's no requests. Okay.
That's about it.
I'm going to go on to next. What's next?
All right, we have, we'll put two funds together. Was it pages 51 and 58? Our two, what I call insurance funds. Charity is with us. The first fund that we call risk management is basically our general liability and
Hey,
property.
hang on, Dave, one
Sorry.
second before we move on. I
Okay.
know that Dennis has got a lot of concern about litter control and about the state highways and all, and that's gonna be on our agenda to talk about the Peachtree Parkway, and I know that nobody is more aware of trash pickup than Tammy, and I just think in the near future, when we have a big conversation about litter pickup, and even on state highways, which I know Tammy is very little, well, she is on 369 a lot, but that when we have a bigger meeting and look at that in depth, we need to have Tammy involved in that conversation. And especially when we're looking at funds and looking at the funds that she deals with right now, and coordinating the sheriff's office and all of that, we need to look at that and involve her in its totality, and not look at things through piecemeal and we need to look at everything and the cost of everything, and not just look at bits and pieces. And we need to look at the litter program in totality and the dollars spent. I mean, when you're talking about the expenses that y'all mentioned to me yesterday, we don't need to be, I would like to look at all of it. I mean, not just look at, when we're talking about, I don't know if it's on the consent agenda tomorrow night, but you're looking at spending $57,000 or whatever it is on 2 months of billboards. I mean, we've got to look at that in all of it. And we just don't need to be looking at things in a silo and looking just at Peachtree Parkway, but we need to look at all of it at one time. Don't you agree, Dennis and Molly?
I totally agree. That's why we're having to do this knee-jerk response. Is we haven't had a county policy that reflects the increased demands and expectations of the citizenry. They're just not gonna have it if we have grown-up medians and looking like who knows what. They just expect more, and I think we need to get a comprehensive, holistic agreement, like you said, Cindy, that takes into account everything and looks at all the funding sources and looks at where it all will be spent, and takes in account all of the main roads in the county, whether they're state maintained or not, it doesn't matter. The expectation is still there that we keep it up, and state's only going to mow it a couple of times a year, and that's just not going to cut it. So I 100% agree with you, Cindy, that we need to have everybody in on that and all funding sources considered with the same objective, so they're not working at cross odds with each other.
I agree with what Dennis and Cindy are saying. However, let me add, are we sure that we're tapping into and absolutely pulling everything that we can from the state for the funding of keeping up the state roads? Because there may be resources, I'm not saying necessarily monetary, but we talked in a meeting yesterday, spoke with Eric and with Darren about the possibility of the prison force from the state level. And we just need to make sure that we're getting everything from the state for them to take care of their roads before
I agree.
our level. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
I agree with you, Molly. And I guess we are, John and them could, and Ken just sent us a thing under attorney-client on the email there to look at it on the same subject. But yeah, and John, maybe you could interject here, but I think Eric's plan was to just take whatever money state was going to give us and us take over certain areas of maintenance on the state roads to meet our expectations or something like
There's
that.
three options. I think the board needs to figure out what option works, but one option is, and actually we're trying to get with GDOT this afternoon to get some more information, but so one option, and it's a sensitive issue because it's the county maintaining state assets and
Which is what they want us to do. They want to do a poor job, so we take them over. I know what their plan is.
So let me
Well,
ask,
I
I mean,
think-
this is on the agenda
Yeah.
tomorrow night, but, you know, if you want to talk litter and maintenance, we've got two different funding sources. We've kind of gone through them today. We just talked solid waste. And I was wrong. I said that we're only spending a quarter of our revenue on the ineligible. We're spending a little under a third because the host fees are about 2.5 million, and we're spending about $750,000 on other stuff besides litter, which is eligible. But we've got the John's area where we talk about maintenance, and right now we don't have, if we're going to keep the reserves at the level that we need to keep reserves, we don't have a penny to spend on additional maintenance. But we heard requests for positions and that asphalt melter. So, you know, we need to figure out what we can do. And the best suggestion I have is to try to shift some of the personnel that deal with our capital program to capital funding to free up some maintenance dollars. But I think, you know, you may want to consider, you've got a special call meeting today to talk about the CARES Act, but if you want to bring these different funding sources together and figure out what your priorities are, you know, you may want to consider either devoting a good portion of a work session to that or do a special called meeting. But the three options for maintenance are you do what probably Johns Creek and we know Sandy Springs are doing, which is you take what little dollars GDOT's willing to spend on maintenance. They give us cash. You supplement it with local dollars, and then you basically contract out to commit to the level of service you want. And it may be that the South Forsyth CID can help out since they're in place. You just approved their expansion. They're going to have more money next year than they had this year. But one is to do that project that we take money from GDOT and then we take over responsibility for maintaining state roads. And I don't know that you're ready to go there. That's not my recommendation. The second one
Well,
is,
I guess on this, Eric,
yes, ma'am.
Eric, one of the things is you mentioned Johns Creek and you mentioned Sandy Springs, and I understand those references. However, at the same time, we are county whole, and we are continuously compared to a metropolitan area, to cities.
Yeah.
We're not that small. We're much bigger.
No.
Therefore,
You're
when
right.
we compare what we have to do and how many miles of state road we're talking about inside Forsyth County is a great deal larger than anything
Oh, yeah.
inside any of these cities that we're being compared to. So that's really not a fair comparison.
Well, that's
not-
why I don't
fair's
think-
the wrong word. Accurate. How's that for accurate? It's not really an accurate comparison. It's not about
No,
fair,
and-
but accurate.
I agree, and we've got to. I think you've got to be careful when you start bringing up those small little cities and you start comparing our road, our mileage. You can't do that. I mean, that's not fair at all to compare a tiny little city with as few miles as they've got to a big county. You can't do that. It's just that is not fair at all.
Well, it's
It's
we're
completely
talking.
inaccurate.
I understand what you're saying. We're talking the model. We're a lot bigger than those cities too. So we can
And
scale.
I just think it's not fair to throw out any of that until you've got actual numbers.
Okay.
We've got to see numbers. We can't start throwing out what we can do and can't do until we see how many times it's going to, what the costs are. We've got to see the actual numbers of what we're talking. Are we talking an added $500,000 in a budget? Are we talking $10 million in a budget? Are we talking $50 million in a budget? We don't know.
And I agree. We're not talking dollars today. We're talking three concepts because tomorrow night the board's going to talk about two of the three. The one we're not talking about is asking GDOT to give us money. But the difference is when people drive across 20 and go across the Chattahoochee Bridge, they see that a model where the local community is making significant investments in a state road. And the same thing if you follow 141. But that's one model, and we're not suggesting that we take over responsibility for state roads and they give us what little money they give. But that's one model, and that's what some jurisdictions do. And I agree with you. It's bigger for us, but we're also much larger than those cities. The version 2 that we're trying to get information from GDOT on is if we simply pay them to increase the frequency of their contract to mow state roads. And the same issue applies. We don't know what that cost is, so not looking for any decision in terms of an ongoing commitment. But we do need to know what it would take, because if Commissioner Brown wants to spend his beautification dollars to do an additional mowing or more on 141, we need that information. What does it take to have the legal authority to pay them to do that? So we're pursuing that. That's the second version. The third version is that we get permission from them, just as we've already requested permission from GDOT to have our contractor go onto state roads to pick up litter. And we've been waiting for weeks for them to sign that document. We don't have that. But that's the third model. And commissioners, we understand we don't have prices for any of those. So we're not looking for a decision on an ongoing commitment. We do have a price that Donna has for what it would cost to have a contractor go into 141 and do a 7-mile segment. And that information is available, but that's for a one-time commitment. And that's Commissioner Brown asking us about what would it take to be able to do something quickly to improve the maintenance on one road, not all roads. But you're right, we don't have the dollar amounts, but we do need a sense of whether the board wants to pursue that. And what we're trying to get out of GDOT quickly is, what's the fastest course of action if we want to do a mowing of a segment of 141, not any other roads. But if we want to do that quickly, what's the fastest way to do that? And we know the cost if they'll let us use our contractor. What we don't know is the cost if we were to pay their contractor to do an additional mowing. But we're not trying to jump ahead of you, commissioners, because it is a big issue and it could be huge in terms of cost. And we assume that you'd want to apply a similar standard across all those state roads, and there are a lot of roads. But if you're interested in having a discussion on that broader topic of both litter and maintenance, then give us a sense of whether you want a special call meeting or whether you want to have commit some time at a work session to bring Tammy to talk about litter pickup and John to talk about what maintenance might cost us if you want to go down that path. We're not trying to set you up.
I think if you're going to have a conversation about it, you need to talk about it in its totality with everybody involved, including GDOT, including Tammy. I mean, nobody knows about litter and the cost of it and how much it encompasses than Tammy. I mean, she's been involved in it for years, not just right now. And it's a bad year to talk about it because it's a year when the costs are enormous and the budget's down, revenues are down. It's a bad time, to be talking about it because it's a year when our budget, we've been trying to cut costs. We've asked every department to cut back, including ourselves. And it's a bad time to be bringing up something that costs a lot more money.
Also with this right now, of course, in the summertime, the overgrown grass is obvious, whereas in the wintertime it's not. That's one. And two, with this, I don't see where it's an either or of having a special call meeting or having a discussion at a BOC meeting, bringing in Tammy, GDOT, and everyone. To me, I think we need to, for my stand, is a special call meeting with Tammy, with GDOT, and also for the public. It's got to be accessible to the public because it's hard to, it's easy to compare us to an area that has a great deal of commercial space, say Alpharetta, for instance. Great deal of pervious surface commercial space, little bitty tiny bit where they have to actually keep up green stuff in comparison to us when you cross over the county line. So in order to try to get an honest communication and an honest visual to the public as to what we are trying to fund, what is not funded from the state, how much it does cost, and the comparison of metropolitan area to a county, the difference of that. To me, all of that would take a special called meeting, including all of those folks that you mentioned.
Yeah,
we look at how to schedule that.
I agree with all of the above, but I just know if I don't get some grass cut down here, I'm gonna have to go in the witness protection program.
Well, Dennis, we might be out mowing that ourselves at night sometime.
Well, we can't because we're encroaching on GDOT.
Well,
so
that's why we have to
Todd
do it at
about
night
that.
with flashlights when no one would know that we were there.
Todd said he would help too, but if we can't even get on the property without getting in trouble, I mean, it's a catch-22.
That's the trouble. Everything requires permission from GDOT, but, okay, so I think we've got a follow-up item that we'll look at communicating with the board about a special called meeting and see if we can get GDOT to participate in that, as well as certainly Tammy, I know, is excited to talk later. I'm watching her on her camera as we're speaking about this. And then John and Garen, obviously.
Well, let me just throw this out there, okay? This is not the meeting or the venue for the discussion of that. Let me just throw this out. Dennis, that which is the cost for that which you need covered immediately, that's going to be covered Thursday night, is it not, in that part of our meeting?
Yes, that is. Well, that's the intent.
So that should be taken. The immediate need should be voted on Thursday night for you. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, we're not asking you to wait all that time. Thursday night, we should be able to address the immediate need that you have.
Yeah.
And he's taking that out of his beautification funds, and he's just waiting on GDOT to approve it.
Understood. All I'm saying is I don't want Dennis to think that we're trying to, that I disrespect where you're coming from, young man, with being, with having grass growing up over your head. I get it. I really do, because I've got Highway 20 and part of 141 as well, and part of 9. So, I understand. Believe me.
Thank you.
And Tammy, I don't want you to think that we're disrespecting your ideas on litter and about the billboards, but this is part of a larger discussion that sort of just came out of nowhere.
I don't take it as disrespectful, and I appreciate what you mentioned a while ago about drawing me in, because that's the one thing that I think that I try to preach, is that it's multifaceted litter. It's not just about picking it up. You got it. There's several components. If you just pick it up and you don't do anything else, it's a never-ending cycle. So, and I think you guys remember we do have a community outreach specialist that now works under me that just started, that specializes in litter as well. So we do have more resources now as far as tracking and numbers, and so we're poised to really start to tackle the issue now. But COVID hit and lots of other things have happened, but we are making some progress, and I think we're talking about the right things.
Thank you.
Yep. Good. Thanks.
Okay, if there's no more discussion on that, so we'll look at I guess the board will need to have a discussion on authorizing a special called meeting. The next step would be, we're back to Dave, to charity.
Okay, back to our what I call our insurance funds. The first fund, page 51, which we call risk management. I'm just going to give a little explanation about these and how they work. Basically covers our general liability and property insurance type coverages, basically every other coverage other than workers' comp, which is in the other fund we'll see. So the costs that are included here, other than the staff managing the claims and the safety program and so on, is primarily two things you see in the operating expenses. And by the way, this budget you'll see is pretty level right across the 3 years. For that little under $2 million, we pay both insurance premiums for the various types of coverages that are included in this fund. One of the primary provider for that is ACCG, and so a large piece of that premium goes to them for things such as auto coverage and general liability. Then also for the portion of the claims that the county pays. For example, I guess you'd view it as our deductible, but for auto, our deductible, the ACCG program, is $50,000. So for most auto accidents, we're basically self-insured. They're under $50,000 and so on. So those expenses are here. Where the funding comes from is from all of those that are covered, if you will. So we charge this out. The charges for services is broken down to every single area of the county, every department, every fund, every user who is covered by this program. So I like to view that as the insurance premium charged to all those areas. And it does include a factor for claims in how much we charge out of this to a different department or whoever is covered by this program. That's a bit of a brief overview. Charity, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but if that pretty much explains how this fund works, you can jump in there if you'd like. But things look like they're continuing on as they have been for the last couple of years. Charity?
Yes, right now everything is pretty much the same. What we're requesting for 2021 is very similar to 2020. With the finance committee, I would like to just, sort of throw out some, there have been some changes with ACCG, and they had a relationship with a broker, Marsh. And now ACCG has brought that broker in-house. So we do have some insurance that's in this fund that was outside of ACCG, coverages that are not included in their programs that we brokered with. So in the near future, I'll be working with procurement to potentially look at, broker services for some of those non-ACCG coverages. But I also would like to just throw out there, that we're probably at a point, with the county that we need to potentially look at some strategies for insurance, whether it's, bringing more in-house for self-insurance, looking at programs, things like that. ACCG is a great partnership, but we haven't marketed this insurance programs since I've been on board, and I've been here since 2007. Just to look and see, where that lies. And that is some things that we'll bring forward. But for 2021 budgeting purposes, we've kind of streamlined and just been consistent and not really asking for any increases or anything. We think that with the marketing strategy that we can stay within, our budget.
Okay, and therefore there's nothing new requested. If we may move over to the workers' comp fund and program over on page 58, the summary there. Again, pretty much in line, a little bit of some increases. This program is a self-funded program, so we pay premiums for stop loss or excess insurance above the amount that we cover as a county. That limits our liability. And again, this is charged out to all the various areas of the county based on the number of employees, specifically the salaries, the categories that they are in, different risk categories for workers' comp. And that, anything else you want to add on workers' comp, Charity? How that's working for us as a self-funded program?
The only thing, again, no significant changes expected in 2021. The work comp market is kind of a hard market for, public entities, especially having the public safety side, and that's ever evolving. But we have good workers' comp laws in Georgia that, are good to work with. So don't anticipate any, significant changes, just trying to keep, the employee safe. I will say on the disclaimer for when I did the budget, everything was pre-COVID. So risk management has been heavily involved in the COVID things, and our resources and budget submittal before this was all pre-COVID. So we'll see how that changes for 2021. But right now, we're status quo.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, Dave?
All right, the last fund for track 2 that we need to look at, which we bring forward to the board and the committee. And this is pretty much just a function of the program that's in place for our health insurance for our employees. The summary is down on page 55. I will make a couple of hopefully key comments on this fund. You'll see this program is a benefit. It's a large program. It's a $35 million program funded from both the county as the employer and from the employees that choose to participate. And looking down the detail page a little bit, that 35 million is broken down, about 30 million coming from all the various departments whose employees are covered, and $5 million from employee contributions. Just a comment on the fees, the employer contribution, we've said we're looking for, and you'll see from the bottom of this how well this program is performing. There's no increase. We're looking to the rate. It's just over $20,000 per employee for all of the areas who are covered. And I would not recommend overall for an increase in the employee rate for the employees coverage themselves. We've been shifting this program the last few years on a plan to move some of that coverage cost more to the employees who have dependent coverage. And where that will go this year will depend. We do have a new consultant broker, if you will, that the board just approved after we went through a search process and for renewal of the contract. We expect them to come in and make a presentation to the Finance Committee. I'll talk about what we're looking forward to in August. So depending on those recommendations, we will adjust this budget accordingly. On the expenditure side, most of this, of course, goes to claims, and that budget for general claims is over 25 million. We've had good performance of this last couple of years, so we think we've got enough coverage there for any increase in health coverage claims cost and the stop loss premiums. We also have in here now the cost for full year for the health center, which is just over about $600,000 to operate the health center. And we still have some reserves available in addition at this funding level. So I think this fund is in pretty good shape right now. Don't have any other questions about this budget. I'd be happy to try to answer
What was
those.
our projection that it would cost?
For the health center, we had put aside $800,000 in the prior budget, so we're coming in under that. I think we got a very good contract with a large contracted provider with HealthStat. So I think we were pretty pleased with how that came in. I think lower than what we were expecting.
And what about the use of it? I mean, how many employees do we think are using it?
Yeah, we were doing real well. I don't know the percent from it, and then COVID hit, so that's changed the whole dynamic of who's coming into the health center. Or we now do have remote appointments where people can remote in, get an appointment, get their prescriptions, and so on. So we just had a report. HealthStat gives the benefit committee, which is 3 people from personal services and plus myself. We did just we get their monthly reports from them, and the activity is still good. But yeah, that usage of in-person coming in took a hit with the stay at home and the COVID experience. But it's still operating, and we're still providing services, and I think the usage is still good.
Well, Dave, I think it's been advantageous that we have control over that for the testing of employees. So
exactly.
It's playing a different role that we didn't even anticipate, of being able to have a facility where we can take our employees, get COVID tests, and then I don't know that Chris is still on, but the ability to use a local lab that's able to turn those tests around quickly. I mean, nationally, you hear stories about people waiting up to 2 weeks to get test results, and we're getting test results back, I think, the same day when we go through our facility, as well as having the testing done locally. So,
Eric,
yeah, that's a big plus.
Yeah. Eric,
you're on. You can talk about that.
Yeah. So, to Eric's point, the clinic the wellness center has been very advantageous through the COVID, because the county's agreement with the laboratory that is handling our testing, we're able to get employees, scheduled with the wellness center to do the test. And the majority of our tests are coming back within 24 hours. And
yeah, that's great.
What I'm seeing for some of our employees who, whether it's due to volume or maybe just personal preference, are testing at, another health provider, is usually sometimes 3 days. But some of these testing sites are taking 7+ days. And when we're trying to, identify exposures, it has been critical. And the wellness center has been absolutely phenomenal to work with us. And we've increased, our testing capacity over the last couple of weeks. And there are people that are reaching out across the state, across the nation, to Chris, to really look at our processes and procedures and what we're doing, especially, you know, with our labs and being able to do that testing.
That's great. That's a benefit we weren't even counting on.
Exactly.
I didn't anticipate at all. And Dave, back in when the whole Cadillac insurance and dealing with all of that, I mean, we were seeing increases at one time of 11%.
Yeah, one year I know our claims really jumped up very high. We had a couple of years of low claims, and they just spiked back up again. And I
It
think
was higher than 11 one year.
yeah, I think one year
and
was,
now,
yeah.
I mean, what is it this year?
From this year to last, oh boy, I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but we've been running maybe 5, 6, 7% up some years. You can see here on this budget, we're only budgeting 3% increase for next year, but that's because the 2020 claims budget is much higher than what we need compared to last year. So I think we've gotten ahead of that, if you will. I mean, there was a time when this fund had no reserves in it at all, and now we've ended up having over 5 million. I think maybe as of last year, maybe up to $7 million in reserves. So we're just highly confident. That's why we can say we don't need to increase our premiums to our departments for this. I think the fund is stabilized real well, if that's a good way to state that.
I mean, to have a 1% revenue, I mean, this is incredible that we're going in a different direction totally.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, yeah, a number of pieces have come together. And I think the health center has been an important part of that too, because I know Health Stat said for the first quarter or two, like up till March, the usage, they were a little surprised how high it was compared to other health centers they've started in other governments. So it's been good. It's been received well. And I think their surveys show the employees that have used it have been very pleased with being able to go there and use it.
Good.
Let me come. I want to comment on one other thing, just because I want to avoid any misunderstanding from this budget if someone looks at it. On the bottom, very last line of this budget, you'll see a transfer out to general fund of 1.6 million. That is not to help the general fund. I'm going to explain what that is. That's the part of the program which we call OPEB, other post-employment benefits, where our employees, if they retire before Medicare age and they've earned enough points by age and years of service to the county, even though they retire, they can continue on our county insurance, paying premiums just like our employees do. That cost is broken out separately. We're required by the audit requirements to record that in the general fund. So that $1.6 million, you could actually add that to the total claims cost. That's to help cover the claims just for retired employees that stay in this program. So, and that's a lot. You can see 1.6 million, and it's a relatively small number of people covered by that. But that's what that is. It's for the retired employees' benefit. It's not something that funds the general fund. I just want to explain that. And with that, any other questions about the health coverage program? And the committee will see some more on this. I'm hoping next month when their new broker consultant comes in to present the projected rates for next year for the committee.
What happened to the other broker?
Well, they were in the short. We went out with an RFP, as you do periodically, and we had a number of submissions. Our other broker was one of the 3 finalists, and when we reviewed, the committee reviewed all the submittals and experience and everything else. It's not based solely on price. In the end, price is a part of it, but the committee, after all the presentations, 3 presentations, recommended going with a new broker. So that's, and the last one did not win the new contract, if you will, at least as a recommendation to the board, and the board concurred and awarded it to Benalytics, I believe is the name of it. And we'd like the committee to get to meet those people when they come and present to the finance committee. I believe that'll be next month. I'll talk more about next month's meeting in a moment.
I was going to say that maybe that's where we are now. We've gone through all funds, Dave.
Yeah, and if I may summarize now, and I think we're looking forward to where we're going from here. For our meeting that we have scheduled, we're scheduling a monthly meeting next month in August for the finance committee. There's an opportunity to put some other things on the agenda as well. First of all, let me summarize, if I may, where we are in the budget. Now that we've come through all areas of the budget in track 1 and track 2, We will combine this all into, again, one total proposed budget for the full board, and put all this together moving forward, getting ready for adoption. Again, this comes after the adoption of the millage rates at tomorrow night's meeting as proposed. So we'll put together the entire proposed budget. What we need to do in that, I believe, with the Finance Committee, other than that present that available for all the commissioners, is in the August meeting on the agenda, what we need to bring back is all of the new items that we did not really make any recommendations on or give any direction on for the full board to consider. And again, we'll update with the final tax digest where the general fund stands, how much funding is available for those new items, and any other updates on the revenues as we're projecting them under the recession. So we'll bring back that list of items for the Finance Committee's review for recommendations or direction, prioritizing them as to which ones the committee feels should be recommended to the full board to be included in the proposed budget. Those are mostly new positions, and a few other programs were on that list. I think the list for the general fund was just over $3 million, and any other adjustments that we bring forward. That's the first thing on the agenda, I believe we'll have for the Finance Committee in August. Second, the audit is being completed this week, our annual audit. There was extensions allowed by the state. Normally that's completed in June. Actually, there's a 90-day extension, but since everything was ready, we asked the auditors not to go beyond July in finishing the audit. So we will ask the auditors to come in and present the audit to the Finance Committee on the August agenda next month for the Finance Committee meeting. Third, then, is the insurance, the health insurance. We want to bring in, if it's ready, and I think we need to be ready, the new consultant with the health insurance recommendations as far as rates for the employees are concerned on that side, and then other insurance recommendations where we purchase our stop loss and so on, renewals going forward. And just an overview of also our our dental and optical coverages and other optional coverages we make available to the employees. That's the three areas I have for the agenda for next month. There may be others to add. Don't come to mind right now. I don't have it on my list, but there will be a Finance Committee meeting next month in August for whatever we need to put on that agenda.
Anything else anyone would like to see as part of that agenda?
Maybe if he could just go, or maybe you said this the first item, but just go over where we are exactly. Maybe LMIG will be done, so we can get a better idea of exactly where we're going to be.
Right. For the proposed budget for any operating fund.
Okay.
All right. And with that, I think that's all I've got for this.
Nothing else. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all for the
Yes,
time
thank
this
you.
morning.
Thank you.
Free.